Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Gretchen Myron. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a Director of Inclusion here at the NCAA. I serve as the primary administrator to the Committee on Women's Athletics, which oversees the Emerging Sports Program. And we're thrilled to have you join us today for our webinar series focused on emerging sports, with this particular webinar focused on women's triathlon, which is an exciting and growing sport at the collegiate level. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Ash. I'll let her introduce herself as well. Dr. Ash also assists with the Committee on Women's Athletics.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Ash. I serve as the Assistant Director of Inclusion at the NCAA with the primary focus on women and gender equity. I'm excited to have you all here join us. Just a quick housekeeping thing before we get started. If you have any questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end, but feel free to use the chat feature where you can pose your questions and we will address them at the end of the session. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to hand it over back to Gretchen.
Great. Before we get into some triathlon specifics, we'd love to just make sure we provide a really brief overview about the Emerging Sports for Women program for those that may not be familiar. This program was created in the early 1990s from a recommendation from the Gender Equity Task Force. Its intent was really to try to grow additional opportunities for women at the collegiate level by offering new sports. So one of the great advantages of this program is that it has provided new participation opportunities that didn't exist before for women. Since its inception in the early 1990s, 5 sports have transitioned from the emerging sport level to the NCAA championship level. Those include rowing, women's ice hockey, women's water polo, bowling, and the most recent one was women's beach volleyball. As some of you may be familiar with, one of our current emerging sports, women's wrestling, is also very close to making that transition. So if you didn't catch that webinar, be sure to watch the recording to learn more about that sport. As I mentioned earlier, the program is overseen by the NCAA Committee on Women's Athletics. They help provide leadership to the program and oversee all of its major functions. Twice a year, the committee receives detailed updates from each of the current sports about their progress and is able to provide feedback to the sports on how they are doing. The committee can also make recommendations to each division to consider introducing legislation related to the sports or to see if they can help move through the process. There are 6 current emerging sports. So in addition to triathlon, which we'll talk about today, acrobatics and tumbling, equestrian, rugby, stunt, and women's wrestling are also emerging sports. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the experts on triathlon itself. From USA Triathlon, we have Tim Yount. Tim is an absolute expert on all things triathlon and is going to walk through several different elements of the sport before turning it over to 3 different administrators on NCAA campuses that will be able to speak more to the programs that they are seeing on their campuses and the benefits there. Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, Gretchen. Thanks, Ash. You guys have done yeoman's work in really supporting the emerging sport process, really supporting triathlon and the other sports that are engaged in this. So I want to make certain that you're also complimented for the great work you're doing in conjunction with us. You know, it was interesting. I have about an athletic director call or senior women's administrator call a week, and I was on a call with an athletic director last week, and he got to the end of our discussion. He said, you know, what's interesting, Tim, is that this is an amazing sport, and I'm hoping that more and more people will connect with you and what you're doing with the program support that you offer and the other things that you're doing to really create a market option for institutions to look at triathlon as a next sport for women's athletics that they can consider. So that made me feel good coming into this call. I'm going to dive into the details, and I'm going to dive in fairly quickly. And so hopefully at the end of this, you'll be able to mirror what that athletic director was saying to me last week when I was having the conversation with him. The sport body is triathlon, as Gretchen noted. Last year, our sports sponsor, or 2022, 2023, our sports sponsorship numbers were 8 Division I, 13 Division II, 13 Division IIIs. We have modified that number considerably. We're now up to 42 that are set and ready to meet sports sponsorship this year, which means we've hit the threshold of 40 to hopefully begin that process come late fall, early spring next year. The demographics of our sport, we've really done a lot of work to make certain that we've seen some diversity growth in the sport. So we do a lot of work in the US, we do a lot of work internationally to continue to drive our racially diverse numbers. We have 40% growth of international students, 27 countries. Again, we've grown that number considerably. And this is at each divisional level, 1, 2, and 3, where the institutions are able to drive numbers through, again, an international growth market that is 132 countries strong for us in the sport of triathlon. 65% of the coaches are full-time. And the reason why we mention that here is that there's this movement of part-time to full-time staff, whether it be a coach and volunteer team or whatever. So the part-time to full-time coaching usually will happen in year 2. If they do start with a part-time coach, that number will hope to continue to rise. 98% of the student athletes are recruited for triathlon. And we say this because of our crossover abilities. We're one of those sports where you can see crossover into track and field, indoor, outdoor. You can cross over into swimming as well. And some institutions where it works out can even cross over into cross country, even though it is also a fall sport. In those crossover numbers, 149 athletes last year on our different institution campuses were able to contribute to another institution's needs, whether it be a conference championship they're trying to win at the distance level, where it may be 5,000 meters for track, or it might be the longer swim distances in swimming. So we're seeing crossover work to our advantage, recruited as a triathlete, able to compete in other sports as well. Continuing on the demographics, one of the things that we pride ourselves around are some of these numbers. We look at graduation rate of 98%. So we're talking about a very smart student athlete that comes in, wants to be part of our program, wants to graduate. And many times they'll go on and get their master's degrees and stuff like that. But the first thing is they want to do is they want to make sure that they graduate and meet that goal they've established for themselves, not only as athletes, but student athletes, as the name would signify. Average age is 65%, which means the student athlete is getting some great support for costs that surround their ability to be a student athlete without the worries and stresses that come with having a lot of costs that you have at the end of your time at that institution. Average GPA is 3.53, with 14 programs having more than a 3.5 GPA. And this is one of the things, if we could walk away and have no other numbers speak to anyone, it would be the GPA that we're proud of. We know that there are some institutions where this is the number one sport on their college campus, because we're hearing it often. We want to continue to be a leader in that realm. 7 programs, again, had GPA sport as number one on their campus for women's athletics. The equivalency units right now, and I say right now as we know them, where there's obviously a lot of shifts and changes happening within the NCAA regarding roster size and stuff like that. But right now, 1.7 is a year 1 number that many institutions are able to hit, 2.3 in year 2 and 2.88 in year 3. The roster potential, when we're talking about the ability for a roster to get to meet some needs, oftentimes what we'll do is make sure that they're set up for that success. At 12 to 14 student athletes, you should be able to do that with one coach. When you get into 14 plus, you're now looking at probably an assistant coach or volunteer coach being a little bit more active, but this potential to have a consistent 18 to 20 student athletes is there for the sport of triathlon. The goal for many is that 12 to 15. That's the sweet spot. That's what many of them are looking for. With the crossover abilities that we just touched on, it means that you can actually get more traction than that from a student athlete that you actually recruit as part of a program. Recruiting basis. We do have the fortunacy of being like maybe a few other sports under the realm of the NCAA, where we are able to recruit a single sport athlete. It might be a runner. It might be a swimmer. And in many cases, it can be a cyclist. Soccer has also become a sport where they obviously do a lot of running in soccer. We've been able to get good traction with soccer being a sport where the athlete wants to cross over as well. International recruitment is 250,000. We talked about 132 countries represented. And the single sports, we're doing some things around single sports that maybe isn't novel, but it works for us. And that's looking at combines and clinics and even creating a camp relationship with the group that is allowing us to put camps on college campuses so we can see recruitment at a higher rate. The target areas of growth, this is kind of split into a couple of bullet points. Number one is we think it's important for us to continue to expand the roster size. And so we've created a 15-prong recruitment build that actually has us stepping up to help the institution reaching certain hard to get locations and databases that they may not be easily found in some of the single sport swim databases that exist. We also believe that our talent scouts can become a bigger player in all that we're doing too. These are talent scouts that we have, coaches in different parts of the country who are helping us identify talent. So there's a single sport athlete that may come to us and say, hey, I would love to look at triathlon at the next level. We would put that person in touch with a talent scout who can put that person in touch with the head coach of that particular institution. We're going to continue to grow the talent scout numbers so we can continue having these talent scouts in the places where we have institutions. The other part of our growth curve that we're trying to do is to make sure that we have enough density in certain locations. So if we have an institution that needs a little bit of support to keep travel costs down, we will recruit hard in that area where we have that existing institution. But it's also where we have a lot of institutions looking at how we can continue to think about building out a conference championship because we have the density with enough programs in that location to be able to start having that kind of conversation. So it kind of mixes both where we have a single institution and we have multiple institutions as well as part of our prong of focus. Competition format. Again, this makes it really easy. It's not Ironman, as some of you know Ironmans. It's definitely not Ironman. It's a sprint or what we call super sprint distance. It's a combination of indoor, outdoor. It could be a hybrid model. It could be what they call duathlon, which is run, bike, run. It could be aquathlon, which is swim, run, or run, swim. It can be done in a pool that you have on your campus with a short run outside your pool on the college campus itself. The ability for us to be able to leverage that type of racing opens the door for us to be able to do a lot more races and a lot more things. Even though we have a 4 contest minimum as part of our sport, we have a six event maximum as part of that as well, which allows you to do some of these smaller events. It could be duals, triangulars, quads. We can have a full squads compete at nearly all of our races that we have. So you're not sitting any athletes that may not get to be on the field of play. That won't happen in triathlon. The championship structure, we've kind of modified this the last couple of years and really looking at national rankings, getting people to the 2 regional championships that we support. And then our national championship is going to be comprised of the athletes that qualify through the 2 regional championships that we have. We've looked at a different model because we wanted to have every athlete that earned the right to be in competition to be able to do the races. 3 different waves, we call it A, B, and C wave. And then at nationals, A, B, and C wave. And so it might be that you have the top athletes in the A wave, the next level athletes in the B wave, and the next level of athletes at the C wave. This will be something that we unveiled, that we've seen it happen in other situations, and we know it works, and it allows, again, student athletes to compete at the events what they covet, and that will be typically the national championship locations. Combination between team and individuals, again, kind of looking at the cross-country model where we have a cross-section of teams that will qualify based on how they do in the regional championships, and then individuals that will accompany those teams as well for teams that may not be as strong or as deep, but still want the chance to compete at nationals. Bike and runs are usually multiple loops. We say this because it creates a footprint that's much, much smaller in size. So you could actually do it in a square mile of 2 to 3 miles in an area where you're doing 2 or 3 laps on a bike. You might be doing a lap or 2 actually on the run as well. Facilities, it's amazing how many institutions contact us and say, Tim, we don't have a pool there, therefore we may not be able to do this sport. That conversation existed 7 or 8 years ago. It does not exist now because what's happening is these institutions are able to leverage a local municipal pool or a community pool, YMCA, YWCA pool. So 68% of our institutions have their own, 32% do not. So that has not been a roadblock for many of these institutions that want to have the sport. We also have pools of different distances. So some may be 25 yards, some may be 25 meters, some may be 20 yards. It doesn't really matter. As long as there's a body of water, a pool that you can actually use, that's why it works. Swimming can actually be done in a body of water that might be close to the institution campus as well. It might be an open body of water, it might be a lake, it might be a pond. As long as it's safe to swim in, a lot of institutions will do training around swimming with buoys that they're using as part of their races, or to try on new equipment. Maybe it's a new wetsuit or something that they need to wear in the water. Open body of water becomes a training option 1 or 2 times a week, or maybe it's 1 or 2 times every other week. It depends on what the institution can actually do. Biking is mainly outdoors, although during inclement weather, it might be indoors on trainers. And these trainers are things you can set up in a pretty small room, pretty small space. You can set them up outside under an overhang. You can put them about anywhere because they're mobile trainers. And then running is mainly outdoors. Again, we do have the ability to be on trails and paths and side roads and really not in the traffic flow, so you can keep athletes safe. And sometimes you can use a track. If you don't have a track, don't need to have a track, but you can also use tracks for speed work as well. Some of the budgetary commitments that are had, the really good thing is that the average operational cost, and we say 99,000 for the A5s. This is, again, a number. It's an aggregation of information we've gathered from our institutions. 55,000 for the non-A5 Division 1s, 43,000 for Division 2s, and about 38,000 for Division 3s. This is going to vary, and it comes down to what do you want the goals of the program to be? What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to be really competitive at that highest level and spend a little bit more on equipment, maybe? Or it might be you want to travel a little bit further to get to more events that are maybe looking at larger squad sizes, teams, stuff like that. You get to dictate what that budget really is. Can you do it for less than these numbers? You absolutely can, and many do, and we work with them on that process. The one thing that we are also able to do now that we've been able to do hit and miss over the last couple of years is grants. We have a brand new donor who came in with nearly $1 million in grant funding because he said to us, I love what's happening with triathlon at this level. I love where it's going. I love what it's going to be. And so that infusion of cash allows us to create more seed funding support for institutions that are not in the sport. It's also opened the door for us to create what we're calling continuation grants. And these are grants for the existing institutions that maybe need a spot check payment of $4,000 or $5,000. Maybe it's to buy some different equipment. It might be to get to a different location for an event or two. It could be a number of things. And this is why this grant donor funding becomes so critical, is because we have the luxury and the flexibility to do some things to also help the existing programs that have already exhausted their seed funding to want to use some funding to do some other things. We've negotiated with partners. We have a portfolio of partners that have stepped up to offer wetsuits, to offer bikes, to offer other equipment and soft good needs that are there for the institution. We can create those relationships with the institution, or they can make it on their own. Some will have coaches that they will actually hire that have those inroads already built, but we are certainly there to do more work and support around that as well. Next slide, please. The coaching education pipeline. We've really looked at what we can do to create a more vast, far-reaching education platform for our coaches. Number one, we're creating what we're called Triathlon 101. These are where our coaches can actually teach a class on the college campus, or we can add a high school Triathlon 101 program so that we get more kids to understand the sport before they even look at college as an option. We also have created a brand new NCAA curriculum, which is taking all the insights of our current coaches and allowing them to speak about things that they feel they do well. It might be recruitment. It might be work that they do with the administration. It could be fundraising that they become really skilled at. These are modules that we've created that we build into these opportunities, again, to expand our reach so that we have a larger pool of our 2,500 coaches that take the NCAA program. Maybe we have 400 of them that are now able to coach at the NCAA level through this process they've established with us, this NCAA curriculum that we build out. They'll also get mentorship support and be able to be mentors for others too, to help move that line that is created sometimes that a little bit faster down the track, so they become a little bit more adept and able to take on the head coaching responsibilities of the institution much more quickly. And the thing that we hang our hat on, we talked about this, is that we are not just a small association that dabbles with the sport as it needs to. This is a governing body that has made a full commitment to putting NCAA triathlon at the top of its priority list. We continue to support this sport as best we can around the grant program. $4.1 million in grants spent, with more spending to actually come. We create overview decks and feasibility documents that were actually built out by past athletic directors so that we can share what this sport looks like from a 13, 14-page perspective. A lot of times it's President Reed ready to present. And so we have these documents we'll share with athletic directors and other administrators as well. We've done customized research where we had one group that came to us and said, it was a consulting firm, hey, we don't have anything really on parents' ability to pay. So what do? We went out, we did a survey on parents' ability to pay. Now we have that as a deck, and we shared that with institution decision makers to say, here's the parents' ability to pay in our sport of triathlon. Any type of custom, we will do the research, put it together in a deck, and actually want to use that as part of their own internal review. This no cost educational support. You can take this level 1 course if you want to at no cost. Okay, we continue to do that. Help procure value in kind at heavy discounts, and camp and combine leadership we're going to provide, and a lot of other things we're going to do as the governing body for the sport. We have onboarding insights. I think it's really important for onboarding to kind of know if it's an 18-month onboard, if it's a 12-month onboard, if it's an 8-month onboard, what that onboarding timeline might look like. We have the ability to show you what we would like to see happen with next steps. We have sample budgets, an aggregation of information we receive from our existing institutions. We have mentorship that we hired previously, where mentorship goes for the new hires and our existing coaches that do a great job of being leaders for us on these college campuses. We have job descriptions that we share. We have town halls that we do for a new coach that wants to be recruited. We have a town hall with the athletic administration team. They have a chance to listen to what the athletic administration is talking about, what they're looking for in a new coach, and it also allows us to build a wider swath of people that are learning about what these administrations are seeking in a new head coach hire. We have recruitment leadership. We talked about the 15 prongs of support that we continue to support. We align the institution with events already in place. Again, you don't need to find new races. These races already exist for many of them, unless you want to do your own on your college campus. They exist by simply calling coaches that are in your area. You can learn what races they're doing and attach yourselves to those particular events. And then video support. We're doing video cuts. We've done some special cuts for institutes that are closed. We're going to start branching out and doing additional video support for institutes as they find a need for us to do that. Onboarding is quick. We can move as fast as the institution can move. We say 3 months in the slide deck, but it's faster than that if it needs to be. It comes down to how fast can you move the granting process, how fast can you get the job description posted and get the recruitment of that hired coach in play, and then what additional steps do you want to take internally yourselves as part of your own onboarding. Again, it's not built on facilities. Facilities never become an issue for a build for us. It's simply how fast can you move internally. We will match you and support you, move you through that process as quick as we possibly can.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate all the information. You always do great with us. Now we have 3 incredible administrators that support triathlon and also sponsor triathlon on their campus. They are here to speak about the lessons they've learned, what has worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, and just give us all the gems they can. So I'm going to ask them to hop on and introduce themselves and go from there. Dr. Alicia, would you like to start?
Yes, I would. I was hoping that Dr. Gines would start us off, as I am so proud to say that he started our program here at Delaware State University. So a little bit about Delaware State. We are an HBCU with enrollment of a little over 4,000 students. We have 19 programs, including triathlon, and over 465 wonderful scholar athletes. So when you think about the profile of our university, it appeared originally that triathlon would be a very non-traditional sport in our sport offerings, but it was not, due to the work that Dr. Gines had laid. We are now entering our 4th season, and we are more than pleased with what we've had with our triathlon program. And so as Tim talked about the gender equity, inclusivity, and diversity, those were things that really kind of came along. I think the biggest thing for me and having it at Delaware State has really been the investment in human capital. And when we talk about those student athletes, those scholar athletes, they have been not only great athletes, but wonderful leaders. And as Tim went through his presentation, I just had to think that, oh, he's talking about Delaware State, because they have the highest GPA on our campus at 3.75. And they are truly scholars in that they do well in triathlon, but they are leaders across campus. And our roster is very diverse. Our coach does an excellent job And being able to recruit both domestically and internationally, we have truly made a commitment to our triathlon program. In the sense of our other programs, it's still a low cost sport. We spend a little over 66,000 in just operating, excluding salary. And so we feel like we do a really good job at supporting the effort of not just having a program, but positioning it for competitive success. And so outside of just the actual competition, one of the bright things that we saw was, as a lifelong sport, we saw the connection to the community. Our coach has been able to do some duathlon events around Dover, Delaware, in which the community has embraced. So they have created a fan following. And so while you may think, when you think about our alumni and it being very non-traditional to our population, the campus as well as the community has really embraced the program. It has been wonderful. We see little kids, 3 and 4 years old, participating, all the way up to our seasoned veterans, as old as 90. So that's one of the things that we really enjoy about the program. And so I'll turn it over to my other panelists to add in.
I guess I'm supposed to go here. My name is Dr. Scott Gines, and thank you, Alicia, for your sweet and kind words. I am the interim vice president for athletics currently at the University of Indianapolis, and prior to that, I, in my full-time career, made 5 different athletic director stops. And as Alicia shared, my last 14 years were at a Hispanic serving institution as well as an HBCU. And I've had the opportunity to launch several emerging sports across my career, triathlon twice. And one of the unique things for me in my comments here will really be about launching the sport, because uniquely enough, I have not still been in the chair after launching the sport. I had either moved on to retirement, or in this case, I'm on an interim mission. But with respect to launching triathlon, which Tim Yount, USA Triathlon, have just been outstanding with, and I should mention that all 6 of my stops dealt with financial and gender equity resets of different levels of intensity. And so my lessons learned will really be structural. And I really begin with the question, is there a command to obey? Well, that's pretty simple when you have that mission and, black budget and to increase opportunities. Our target roster by year 3 here at UIndy for women's triathlon is 21. And I love the components of draft legal within sprint triathlon that basically gives us the opportunity to have 3 waves, as Tim was sharing about the national championship. So setting the vision there with respect to that command. And very importantly, is there a principle to apply? Well, obviously, if your department has some financial struggles, but more importantly, perhaps gender equity ones, this is an ideal piece, an ideal program with respect to that. And for me, I really believe in gender equity plans. I think there needs to be some sort of NCAA directive for all of us who are not proportional to, tap into an emerging sport launch about every 3rd year. But also, is there an example to follow? And there are growing examples in women's triathlon within the NCAA. But, part of this, having a gender equity plan, which becomes the lens you look through in the decisions you make, and you're creating commitment to that. That's part of your vision, but you're also preparing yourself for adaptive challenges. And whether you have a pool or don't have a pool, or wherever you're located, this can happen. And not only can it happen, it can happen beautifully. UIndy is now 25 programs. I just launched 2, women's bowling along with women's triathlon. But this past year, 20 of those 23 sports advanced to the NCAA. And as a department, their GPA is 3.4. So, and that's almost 750 student athletes. And triathlon not only fits well into that high performing culture, it's welcomed and we embrace it. One of my favorite things about women's triathlon is really the recruitment piece of it, kind of that visual intelligence, our instincts. That as Tim mentioned, we are looking for dual sport athletes, but you're not necessarily looking for that A-list recruit in swimming or even in cross country. And we look very closely at women's lacrosse and women's soccer as well. But ideally or optimally, you're looking for that dual sport athlete who maybe is more a B or C level, but boy, they have deliberate practice, they have grit, and they have high commitment, and they are going to become exceptional women's triathletes. They just don't know it yet. And so to me, part of the magic is the hiring itself. We're fortunate to have recently hired just an exceptional head coach. We launched the program in mid-May. We're 12 student athletes right now, and our equivalency value on that at present is 1.0. And so in the business plan within your gender equity and growth of opportunity plan, that's an extremely good net positive for the institution. They will lift your department up. If you're in a high performing department, they will fit like a glove. But thank you for that. And Tim, I promise at some point to stay long enough to actually experience a full season in triathlon.
Thanks, Scott. Looking forward to that.
Yes, I'll go ahead and begin and introduce myself and give you a little history. My name's Jim Miller. I'm athletic director at North Central College. I've been with the college working for the past 38 years. I've been here as a student athlete, a football and a wrestler since for 4 years. So in some capacity, I've been at the college since 1982. So obviously you've seen a lot of things come and go. The last 20 years, I've served as the athletic director. And, we've been able to add 4 sports on the women's side, women's bowling, women's wrestling, which we won the national title a year ago previous and lost on the last match to Iowa this year. Women's lacrosse. And then 7 years ago, actually, we started women's triathlon. And really through the help and encouragement of Tim, he was really, really supportive, and we got one of those original grants, and yet we do have the diversity that the others have spoke to from a regional standpoint. From a standpoint, 7 of our 10 women this year are out of state. They bring something different. Their grades and their 3.4 GPA, they're fantastic, like all of our women's sports. But we do have the equity there, and we have 13 women's sports and 13 men's sports for a total of 26. We have 895 student athletes. So from a Division I to Division II, we actually have the most student athletes at Division III. Yes, we're enrollment driven, but we don't have athletic related scholarships. So that makes it a little bit unique and challenging in itself. We've been very fortunate to have won 5 of the 6 years we've been 5 times we've been national champion. We were 3rd one year. We've had 20 athletic All-Americans. We've had 15 academic All-Americans. Matter of fact, our very first coach, Jenny Garrison, is now the head coach at TCU as one of the 2 Power 4, schools that are competing in women's tri. So anyways, it's been really great. The first 2 years, actually, we hosted the regional over Labor Day, downtown Naperville, which is just a suburb 30 miles west of Chicago. And boy, there was a lot to that. So as I was a new person to triathlon, experiencing it firsthand, and Arizona State flew in, and obviously they swept the top and pretty much eliminated everybody on the bike. So it was a learning experience, but it's been a great one in and of itself, and a lot of people to thank for that. But I really encourage people to consider it because it really provides something that can be a lifelong activity for the women that join in. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We are making great time, which we certainly appreciate. So thanks for staying on schedule, and would love to start getting to some Q&As now. So I'll invite back Tim and our three administrators to help answer some of these questions. Some might apply to one versus the other. So thanks for sending those in, and please continue to do so. Tim, this first one is for you. You talked about grants and how helpful that has been for many programs. Can you talk a little bit more about how a school would apply for the continuation grant in particular that you mentioned?
Yeah, so how we've set that up is we have an application that is in its final stages right now. And so what we will be doing is sending out an application to all the existing institutions so their ADs and other administrators can review, assess if there's a need, and then submit it back to us. We have a committee that actually review that, and then that will be something that comes into play. It's by design during the season, earlier part of the season rather than middle to later part of the season, so that we can pay out that $4,000 or $3,000 or whatever that might be. Now, there is a caveat to this, and there always is that fine print, right? If you get the award in year one, you'll not be eligible in year two, and then you'll be re-eligible in year three. And so what we're doing is we're trying to position it so that funding can be extended every other year to institutions that might need it for various reasons to support budget and whatever else they may need it for.
Great. So if someone has a question, I know we'll share some contact information at the end here. Are they able to just reach out to you to get more info on that application process?
Absolutely. And the same with the seed of institutions, especially the last couple of weeks, have said that the seed funding has been amazing because the seed funding can actually be a pretty big number depending on what your operational costs are. And so happy to give more information about that as well.
Great. And I don't know if any of our administrators on the call would want to speak to or talk a little bit more about that grant funding if their institution has received them and what it's meant. Certainly, we know in the current environment of college athletics, starting a program is, an undertaking. So if any of you want to chime in on that at all, I'll just pause and let you do that right now too.
I'll definitely chime in. It has been a lifesaver for our program. And so while we feel like we have funded it from a healthy perspective, those funds allow the student athletes to have a robust experience and to make sure that at all times they feel equal, so they don't miss anything. And so one of the things that we are working on, though, our coach is a full-time coach, and we don't have a full-time assistant coach. So that's our next goal for where we're moving with our triathlon program.
Well, this is Scott, and I can share from, and I've at two different occasions had a 1-year grant, but as Alicia referred to it as a lifesaver, it strengthens your business plan because while you're not completely subsidizing year one, this is very cost effective. And for instance, having a minimum roster of 7 in year one with grant support, you're already at net positive by year two if you're looking at net tuition revenue on your scholarship plan. So it really changes the conversation and how it's received by your CFO and your cabinet leadership. The growth and opportunity and the growth and reset and your proportionality is extremely positive. So I just really encourage and recommend people to deeply consider adding women's triathlon and know that you're going to have untrammeled help and assistance in that process.
Yeah, the thing I'd say, we did receive that grant as well, and we were going to launch and support the sport regardless, but it certainly helped out when I shared it with the vice president and president, and they were on board immediately. And the other thing that's nice, it isn't like, well, they do that at the beginning. I mean, we've had open search and we've had different things, and Tim and other people reach out to us say, hey, have you thought about this person? I'd like to recommend this one. And so they just don't leave you hanging. They follow through on everything and are very passionate about it. So super helpful.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thanks everyone for those answers. That was super helpful. Tim, I'm going to go to you first with this next question. It's a little bit more details or clarification related to the competition style. So you talked about, different teams kind of competing within larger races. Can you just maybe go into more detail about what some of the different competition models look like, as well as the championship model that you currently are operating under?
Yeah, and I'll break it down so you get a feel for what some of these disciplines are. The draft legal sprint triathlon is the key discipline that we target for regional championships and national championships. And that's a sprint distance, which is a 750-meter swim. It's a 20K bike, and it's a 5K run. That is the goal distance for some of the bigger events that an institution may elect to do during the course of an actual competition season. The door that opens for you to stay close to home, whether you do it on your own college campus or you do it with an institution that's within driving distance, and it might be really close driving distance, is looking at the ability to do an aquathlon, which is what we call a swim run event. So you may do a 400-meter swim in a pool, which would be a serpentine in your pool, and you may open the exit door to your location, and do an on-campus half-mile to 1-mile run, which opens the door for you to be able to do a race that is now one contest, as long as it's against one other varsity women's program with 3. The other disciplines that we have are what we call aqua bike. So you can do an aqua bike event, which would be a swim bike event. So you may be at a body of water out of town. It may be contiguous to where you are positioned as an institution, where you do a swim. You come out, and instead of doing this bike, this run, you may do a bike. The door is also open for you to do some indoor events. And we're working with a bunch of different companies right now to say, can you help us with equipment where you do an indoor swim in a pool? You do a trainer ride, which might be a trainer you have in your workout room, and you do a treadmill run, again, indoors, that's established based on time that you may do. So you have outdoor, you have indoor options. And then the third part of that, Gretchen, to your question, is the ability to do duals, triangulars, or quads. It's also become a really big mainstay for us in that you might have an institution that's within an hour or 2 hours driving distance from you, where you can get together in a Saturday morning and have an event occur in a 2-hour window, and everybody's home by noon, or everybody's home by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you haven't exhausted a lot of study time for the student athlete. These are all the doors that open for the sport to be able to still have it be contest countable and still fun and still competitive opportunity for every student athlete to compete.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Lots of different options there. And I think certainly, again, reiterates what many have said about USA Triathlon's willingness to try to help coordinate several of those different events and participation opportunities to make sure that it's cost effective for schools from a travel perspective, but also provides a really great competition level for the student athletes too. Another question from someone who is attending who is a new program. So we always love to hear that. Can you just go over again, Tim, the minimum sport sponsorship requirements related to competition? I know you talked about roster size and some ideal numbers there as well, if you wouldn't mind mentioning that too.
Yeah, sports sponsorship commitment, and thank you really for the NCAA back when we created these. It's 4 minimum contests, 6 maximum contests against one other varsity women's program, with 3 finishers for each of the 2 institutions that are competing. That is one countable contest if you can accomplish that. Is that, Gretchen, that was the scope of the question?
Sorry, the last part I would add, and can you just talk about the roster differences again? I know you mentioned at the beginning kind of an ideal number and then one where you might have an assistant coach as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is, and I'll get into this just a little bit, is we start talking about You can, at the regional championship, national championships, you can, well, I'll start with regionals. You can race 10, you score 7. At nationals, you race 7, you score 7. So when you're talking about a scoring team, it's 7 student athletes you need, but for sports sponsorship, you only need to have the 3 athletes per institution that actually compete. So what are your squad sizes? And Scott kind of touched on this, that if you look at 21, you're looking at 3 different teams of 7 that you would have as part of your institution's numbers. If you look at 10 to 12, 12 to 14, you're talking about a scoring team of 7 plus others that may be undergraduates that become part of your program as they mature and graduate and move on to the next level of competition. The ideal number, the sweet spot number that we're seeing is 12 to 14. So if you're in that range, you're probably hitting the sweet spot. Now, let me say this, that there are some institutions that they are at a place where they are comfortable with 10 to 12. And that's where they're going to reside for a while. If you get into something higher, it just means you might need to recruit a little bit stronger, harder to get a walk-on or to get someone else that's coming from another place. It might be a single sport athlete. Because as Scott said, their goal there at Indy is to get to 21. We have a few programs. We've got one Division III program, which is larger than 15. And we have a couple of programs that could easily be 20 plus if they wanted to be. They've chosen not to be because it does force that additional hire of an additional coach. It does create maybe a workout schedule with a pool that's a little bit different because you've got now athletes in a pool that you need to spread them out. But the sweet spot is that 12 to 14, and the optimum is that 15 to 18 or 18 to 20, depending on what you actually need for your own goals.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Very helpful. I'm going to take the next 2 and give Tim a break. So the first one was related to men's triathlon. So just as a clarification point, the Emerging Sports for Women program is specifically for adding women's sport opportunities. So that program only is related to women's opportunities. However, men's sports or co-ed sports, there is legislation, NCAA legislation about how to add those. Certainly, I know Tim and his team are very passionate about men's triathlon as well at all levels and growing that pipeline. But as it relates specifically to the Emerging Sport program, it is specific to women at this time. And then another question that was asked was a little bit more about the broader scope of where triathlon is kind of on that overall pathway in the emerging sport program. Tim mentioned the exciting news that they are anticipating that over 40 schools will be sponsoring the sport this fall. For clarification, or for those that aren't aware, the legislation requires that at least 40 schools meet minimum contest and participant requirements before they can be recommended for a national collegiate championship. So that's really that important benchmark that all of these emerging sports are striving for. The first step, or what that kind of looks like, is that after the fall season here, we will begin to look at triathlon and see how many programs actually met those minimum contest and participant requirements. So getting to that 40 is really important. We always like to make a plug for your sports sponsorship and participation data. That is the official count that CWA uses. So please fill that out as accurately as possible when that annual review comes around. It's really, really helpful for us as a starting point to make sure that that's correct, and then to work with Tim and other sport leaders to clarify anything that we need to. If we do confirm 40 programs, the next steps would be for CWA to review the sport and make a recommendation to the divisions to consider adding it as a national collegiate championship. That also requires lots of behind the scenes work to make sure that we work with our colleagues in championships and finance to begin to project what that could look like and go through the full legislative and governance cycle. In general, what we have seen with previous sports and are currently seeing with women's wrestling is that from the time of recommendation to the time of a championship is at least about 2 years just to get through all those different legislative processes. So meeting 40 programs this year would be huge for triathlon to hopefully help start that progress along that path there. But I will say that CWA, as that moves along, will be certain to keep the membership updated. We've been able to share some great stories related to some of the different emerging sports as they move through. And so as anything progresses, they will be sure to share that, especially with those of you that already sponsor women's triathlon. Okay, another good question that we have here. Tim, we did not get a chance to talk about it yet, but I know based on some of the updates you've helped provide to CWA that Triathlon is thinking about and aware of the NIL space as it relates to triathlon and college athletics. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like? And then certainly would invite any of our administrators to share a little bit more about what that has looked like on campus for any of their triathletes in NIL opportunities.
Well, and I'll certainly speak from the NIL perspective relative to what we have done as a governing body. When we first did research on NIL within our existing institutions and our student body, we really felt that we need to play a bigger hand in supporting student athletes' needs around various things as college student athletes. So I'd gotten back from a long ride. I didn't do 100-miler, Scott, like you did last weekend, but I got back from a long ride. And I broke out our NIL program so that it could support triathletes, specifically female triathletes underneath our program. And so we were able to reach out to our donor pool, which was important. And they all contributed to support a corpus of funds that we could use in our first year, which was this past year. We had 24 that actually applied. We were very lean in year one. We had 4 that were chosen to receive funds from us. The best part about this is we communicated what this NIL program was going to be for us. And one of our donors stepped up and said, Tim, I've got millions of air miles that I'm willing to give away. So guess what he did? As part of our NIL collective, he was giving air miles to these athletes to travel to events that they wanted to travel to that otherwise they would never be able to go to. What's that do? It means they get to go to more events that they need to go to because they get points that goes towards their status longer term. They have a chance to experience some new competition, different competition. They have a chance to actually be able to remove some financial burdens as part of that. So the NIL program for us has been huge. It's been through our members that we've been able to grow it, and we're going to continue in year 2 and hopefully many years beyond.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Anything from administrators of some NIL opportunities you want to mention related to your student athletes?
We are growing in that area as we've now had a collective. And one of the things that we found, believe it or not, as some of our donors, they were specifically asking for a triathlon. So, where you were surprised to think that it would be kind of your high profile football and basketball, they were actually asking for opportunities to connect with our triathletes. They have already done a wonderful job with just fundraising and some sponsorship opportunities for apparel. But we are still growing in the NIL space, but very excited as our head coach. She sits on our NIL committee. So she's very vocal in that aspect.
Yeah, at our level at Division III, we haven't had that many NILs and just small pockets and such, but nothing where we'd actually have a group or a committee or even a department that helps, really run all those. We're responsible for a little bit of everything. So even with our higher profile sports, we've had women's wrestling's had a couple sponsored by Titan Wrestling, but nothing on the women's tri side.
Just yet, but hopefully coming soon to North Central, Jim.
Yeah, we're ready. Maybe Tim will sponsor us. That's conflict of interest.
We don't have any NIL, but if I could shift it a little bit, I have begun to at least have the conversation with Women's Triathlon. Tim mentioned the donor gifting the flyer miles, which I think that's a beautiful concept. But at another stop in another gender equity plan and with a different emerging sport or sports, I was able through donors to create matching funds for the once every 4 years international trip. And so I've at least planted that seed within triathlon. I believe in it a great deal. It's an amazing thing. It's not that expensive to actually pull off, but I'm bringing it up because, as Tim shared in his earlier slides, this is a very internationally strong and aware sport or collection of 3 lifetime sports. And in terms of program growth, in terms of just chemistry and leadership, and advancing the message and brand and mission of your university. In addition to NIL, I think this sport is well suited for that 1 and 4 year international rotation.
Great. That's an excellent transition to Dr. Gines. We have just a few minutes left, and I was going to kind of ask for final thoughts there. So if anyone else has a final word or phrase that they would use to describe women's triathlon and what it means at the NCAA level, we'd love to hear that from you all before wrapping up.
One word, I say awesome. We're having nothing but success, and we are truly enjoying the program.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, obviously, for us with the success that we've been able to enjoy from an institutional pride standpoint, from a standpoint of those experiences. Winning individual national championships and team titles has been phenomenal. But then to see how well they do academically, and it's a great combo.
It's transformative. It's strategic, and it will pull from in front all your other sports. I mean, candidly, I don't know why someone would not want to investigate it, much less do it. And because I think everything is there, all the tools to take it, embrace it, and watch it grow and enjoy that view.
Tim, any final thoughts from you?
Can I pull that in together to capture what you said? It is probably the biggest push that we have now is to get that championship status, and we're doing everything we can to make it happen because we know this sport long term has got absolutely even a more amazing potential than it's shown maybe to date. And I think that the excitement is on the other side. The greatest excitement we'll ever experience, the ability for it to be a game changer for the institution, we believe is there. And continue working with athletic directors like we have on this call today. They are amazing people and they are amazing administrators and they're great leads, and we're so fortunate to have them. So thank you.
Great. Well, we are right up at our time. I just want to say thank you again to Tim, to all of our administrators, to Ash for organizing this. It's been incredibly educational. Thank you for those of you that were able to join, especially with so many exciting Olympics competitions happening. Tim's email is right there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to him. He's incredibly responsive and is happy to talk to you about any of your questions related to triathlon. Also, my information as well as Dr. Ash's information is there. This webinar was recorded and we will be uploading it along with the other emerging sport webinars in the coming weeks. So if your colleagues were not able to join, we will make sure that we can get it to share out with them. But thank you all again for joining. Really appreciate our panelists' time today, and have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you.